Good afternoon everyone. This is a micro-teaching video submitted for UGC HRDC refresher course in comparative literature conducted by UGC, HRDC and Babasaheb Ambedkar Marathwada University, Aurangabad. I am Surina Mol R, roll number 29, Assistant Professor of English, Government KNM Arts and Science College, Kanjiramkulam, under University of Kerala. This micro-teaching video will demonstrate an important aspect of micro-teaching, that is the skill of achieving closure. And I am taking a poem by Thomas Hardy. It's titled as The Darkling Thrush, which is a paper prescribed in the text called Environmental Studies, mandatory text for the degree students in Kerala University. An important aspect of micro-teaching is how to conclude a lesson. So first, there are some questions and statements made by the teacher which essentially contribute to the major points covered during the lesson. So in this poem we have 4 stanzas, and the stanza first and second conclusion, or we can conclude the stanza first and second as follows. The poet generally conveys a persistent gloominess in the landscape and in his mindscape. The dreariness of the place and mental anguish is sustained in the passage through the metaphor of dying and death. So the questions that the teacher can ask to the students: how does he convey gloominess through the poetic form? For example, a lot of imageries are used to describe the process of dying and death, and the peculiar words used. For example, the word starting with D, dreariness, then dregs. So these words convey the gloominess that's there in the landscape as well as in the mindscape of the poet. Then the second question that we can ask the student: how does the poet view life versus death? Then the another important point that the pupil or the student can think, it's about the depiction of the natural world. So there is something called natural world out there, but it's always the human beings that shapes or that gives color to the natural world. For example, the poet is very lonely, and he projects the loneliness into the natural world. So there is a definite cultural sensibility that shapes the coloring of the natural world. So when you can conclude stanza 3 and 4 like this: the sudden change that is brought in the natural world by the introduction of an aged thrush. The thrush symbolizes hope and unlimited joy that cast a ray of hope in the deserted place. Questions that we can ask to the students: how do you differentiate between the spirit of the bird and the spirit of the poet? The spirit of the bird, although it is an aged thrush, it is old, frail, very thin, it's going to die soon. The spirit of the bird conveys optimism, but the poet is very dejected, and he has the sadness of the whole humanity weighing down in his head. But the poet is gloomy, and he just sees everything from a very negative way. But the bird symbolizes the ray of optimism, because nature itself is very happy. We only give our emotions to nature. Nature exists separate, or nature doesn't need any human colorings. Then next point that we can we can discuss: is there a man versus nature binary, or is there a culture versus nature distinction present in the comparative reading of stanza 1 and 2 and stanza 3 and 4? So the first two part may correlate to the cultural world, and the third and fourth part is the natural world. Or we can say that the binary is dissolved. There is nothing called pure nature, nothing called pure culture. We see everything through the eyes of human being. And also the cultural versus natural distinction. How much natural and how much cultural. So this is the first slide in the micro teaching video. Now we can move on to the next slide. The teacher can also provide opportunities to the pupils for linking the present knowledge with the past knowledge in the concluding session. How can you connect the poem with an environmental angle? The teacher can come with such suggestions. For example, these students they have studied other environmental literature in the text like Chief Seattle's speech, etc. So here the student can bring Chief Seattle's speech in the class, where the author sees that the beast is my brother, the rivers have life, etc. So you can compare Chief Seattle's speech with this poem. Then another question that we can ask to the student: how does Hardy conceive nature? Is nature active or passive there? Or is there an active depiction of nature or passive depiction of nature? Then the second opportunity: does the author show any imminent environmental crisis here? The student can come up with the history of English literature, history of England at that time. For example, in the 20th century, England, it just became an industrial nation, and this industrialization has affected the psyche of man, so that he became mechanized and alienated himself from nature. So you are bringing the history of England to the class. You can connect this poem to the historical background. Then the teacher can also bring such issues like nature-culture debate that's there in philosophy, literature, etc. And the students can also link the stanzas in the poem to anthropocentrism, biocentrism debate. That is a chief concern in environmental humanities. How much we are centered to, or we are anthropocentric, how much we see nature or human beings in connection with nature. Biocentrism is seeing everything as interconnected as a whole. So this debate can be also we can have certain facts regarding this debate. Then the student can also link it as an example for deep ecology concern and shallow ecology concern. So this poem has many facets or many facts regarding the deep ecology. Deep ecology is about the spiritual and emotional orientation towards nature. So these are some of the opportunities. Finally, opportunities provided by the teacher to the pupils for applying the knowledge gained during the lesson to the new situations. So every text would have an environmental angle, and student must relate how the literary text interact with physical environment. So that is the eco-critical project. So in this poem, we are introducing the students to the basics of eco-criticism. And now they can read a fiction or watch a movie. It's their choice, and they can identify whether the nature is represented in the backdrop or it is an active or passive component in the narrative. Then another debate that is about the nature culture debate that can be added there, purely the existence of a purely natural world or culture, which would add to the dimension of nature. Then they can also pick a poem or fiction, and they can start their own eco-critical reading. For example, Wordsworth's London, or any other films like Into the Wild, etc. The student can also take a regional poem of their place. For example, if they are from Kerala, they can select poems from Malayalam literature. We have a lot of poems there. And they can inquire whether Western environmental criticism can enrich our understanding of literary works. And they can also come with a lot of topics for further research. For example, are there theories related to environment in Indian literary criticism, etc. So these are some of the future prospects. Then how can literature respond to the environmental problems they face in their localities? For example, waste management is a problem, pollution is a problem, water management is a problem. So how can literature respond to the environmental problems they face? Then finally, the student can write creative literature and intervene with their problems.